Ethan never expected a simple Thursday evening art class to change anything in his life. He joined only because his apartment had become too quiet after his breakup. His days felt predictable, and his nights were filled with the kind of silence that made every thought louder. So when he walked into the Community Arts Center in Seattle, he expected nothing more than messy paint and maybe a few awkward conversations. But then he met Claire. She sat beside him during the first lesson, struggling to paint a sunset that looked more like a splash of orange wiping across the canvas. She laughed at herself in a way that felt warm and genuine. Her hair was usually tied loosely, a few strands falling in front of her face, and she pushed them away with the back of her hand while concentrating. She didn't seem to pretend or perform. She spoke softly, listened carefully, and somehow made Ethan feel calmer simply by sitting near her. They weren't close yet, but every week they grew a little more comfortable. They talked about music, travel, favorite movies. Sometimes she asked about his job, and sometimes she shared small stories about her childhood in Oregon. Nothing about her hinted at a complicated life. In fact, she always sounded like someone who lived alone, managed her own routine, and carried her own responsibilities without help from anyone else. Ethan liked that about her. He liked the quiet strength in the way she carried herself. He liked her calmness, her gentle humor, and how she treated everyone around her with patience. He didn't tell her how much he looked forward to Thursdays, but it became the day he cared about most. That's why her words hit him the way they did. On the fourth Thursday of the month, the class wrapped up earlier than usual. People were packing up their brushes and chatting as they left. Ethan reached for his bag, already planning to walk out with Claire the way he had the last few weeks. She stood near the table, tightening the lid on her jar of water, her expression relaxed. Then she said it. "By the way," she said lightly, almost as if it were small talk, "my husband wants to meet you. I told him about you." Ethan froze. The brush in his hand slipped slightly, smudging blue paint across his fingers. He looked at her quickly, thinking she must be joking, but her face didn't carry even the smallest trace of humor. She spoke so casually, so gently, as if the sentence shouldn't shake him at all. Husband, his mind stumbled. He replayed every conversation they'd had. Not once had she mentioned being married. No ring on her finger. No story starting with "my husband and I." No pictures, no hints, nothing. His chest tightened with something he didn't want to name. He wasn't in love, he told himself, but he had started to care maybe more than he should have. And now a word he didn't expect had shattered that quiet, growing feeling. Still, he swallowed everything down and forced a calm voice. "Oh," he managed. "You're married." She nodded, but something in her expression shifted. Her smile faded slightly, as if the truth carried a weight she didn't want to unload here. "I am," she said. But the way she said it wasn't confident. It sounded tired, almost sad. Ethan didn't know what to say. He didn't want to ask too much or assume anything. But confusion spread through him quickly. Had he misread every moment between them? Every warm conversation? Every lingering glance she gave him during class? Maybe he imagined the whole thing. Maybe it was only friendliness, nothing more. Before he could ask anything, Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice. "There's more I should tell you," she said quietly, "but not here." He looked at her, searching her face for some kind of explanation. Instead, she gave him a small, tired smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they are holding on to too many emotions and trying to hide all of them at once. And then she walked away. She didn't rush, but she didn't wait for him either. She headed toward the exit, her shoulders tense, her steps slightly uneven, as if she regretted saying anything, but couldn't take it back. Ethan stood there in the middle of the studio, surrounded by paint-splattered tables and half-finished canvases, feeling something he couldn't fully name. Confusion, yes, but also disappointment, and something strangely close to heartbreak. He didn't even know if he had the right to feel that way. He barely knew Claire outside this studio, but he knew one thing. The way she made him feel was real, even if he had tried to deny it. And now he didn't know what any of it meant. Was she happily married? Was her husband involved in her life? Why didn't she talk about him? Why did she look sad when she mentioned him? And why did she say there was more? He replayed her last sentence again and again. There's more I should tell you, but not here. The words hung in his mind like a door left slightly open. He wanted answers, but he also feared what those answers would mean for the quiet connection he felt building between them. Ethan left the studio that night with his bag slung over his shoulder and his mind spinning. The cool Seattle air brushed against his face as he stepped outside. But it didn't clear the confusion gathering inside him. He had walked in expecting another ordinary class. He walked out knowing that everything, his feelings, her past, the possibility of something between them was about to change. And he wasn't sure he was ready for the truth waiting ahead. The week after Claire's unexpected words, Ethan couldn't focus on anything. Every time he tried to work, her voice, her smile, and that one word husband kept replaying in his mind. It wasn't just confusion. It was the ache of longing mixed with hesitation. He wanted to ask her about it to understand, but he also feared the answer. What if he had misread everything between them? What if she was married in a way that left no room for anyone else? Thursday came again, and Ethan walked into the art studio with a restless heart. His brushes felt heavier, his canvas seemed empty, and his usual excitement was replaced by a nervous tension. Claire wasn't there. He glanced around, pretending it didn't matter, but inside he felt the absence like a hole. Every shadow of the studio seemed to whisper the question he didn't dare ask. What does her husband have to do with you? When the class ended and everyone had left, he saw her waiting outside. She leaned against her car, wrapped in a thick blanket, shoulders hunched as if carrying the weight of the world. Her pale cheeks and quiet posture made Ethan's chest tighten. She looked fragile, yet there was a quiet strength that hadn't left her. Without greeting, she began to speak. Ethan, I didn't lie. I am married. But my husband, Mark, has been in a specialized care facility for the last 2 years. Ethan froze for a moment, struggling to process the words. Married? But her husband was in a care facility. The simplicity of the sentence didn't match the heaviness it carried. She looked down at her hands, fingers twisting the edges of the blanket, as if holding on to something invisible. A car accident? She continued, her voice soft and trembling. He survived. But the man I married isn't really here anymore. Ethan's heart ached for her. She wasn't hiding anything. She wasn't trying to push him away or confuse him. She was sharing a truth she had carried alone. A truth wrapped in guilt, sadness, and a quiet longing for life she had almost forgotten how to live. She looked up at him then, eyes glistening. I never wore my ring after that. It hurt too much. I tried to live normally, but every day felt wrong. I laughed, I painted, I went to work, but I felt empty. Ethan wanted to speak, to say something, but no words came. He felt the tension in her shoulders, the faint tremor in her voice, and realized that she had been carrying this story silently for 2 years. All that time, she had tried to live, to survive, to keep moving, but never allowed herself to truly feel joy. I didn't expect you, she whispered, her gaze steady now, yet vulnerable. I didn't expect to feel anything again. I didn't expect someone to make me laugh after so long. Ethan's chest tightened. Every word she spoke pulled at him, a mix of admiration, empathy, and a growing realization that he cared for her far more than he had admitted, even to himself. He felt protective of her, but he also felt something more, a quiet attraction, subtle and yet undeniable. He stepped a little closer instinctively. Claire, I would never want to make your life more complicated, he said carefully, trying to balance honesty with respect. She shook her head, almost with a small laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. You already have, she admitted, voice breaking just enough to reveal her fear, but not in a bad way. Her words hung between them. Ethan felt a warmth that was almost dangerous, almost forbidden, but he also felt the pull of honesty, of connection. She wasn't asking for anything. She was merely showing him her heart, letting him glimpse her truth without demanding anything in return. Then she added something that made Ethan's heart pound in a new way. My husband wants to meet you because I told him you helped me feel alive again." The words struck him. His feelings had grown quietly over weeks of shared smiles, small jokes, and gentle conversations. But he had never imagined being part of her life in this way. And now, knowing that her husband, even from a distance, recognized his presence in her life, made everything both more complicated and more real. He swallowed hard. "Claire, what do you want from me?" His voice was quiet but firm, full of care. She looked away, eyes glistening, voice soft and almost trembling. "I don't know. That's what scares me." The fear in her tone mirrored the fear in his own heart. In his own heart. There was longing, there was attraction, and there was the unknown. Neither of them could say what the future held. But both of them felt that something significant had shifted. Claire's vulnerability was not weakness. It was honesty. And Ethan realized that what had drawn him to her wasn't just her laughter or her warmth, it was the resilience beneath it. It's the quiet strength she displayed even when life had been unfair. She had survived heartbreak, pain, and isolation. Yet she still found the courage to feel, to connect, to open herself to someone else. For Ethan, the moment was electric. He wanted to reach out to comfort her, to tell her that she wasn't alone. And yet he held back, knowing that moving too fast might complicate the fragile balance she had maintained. He stayed close, attentive, letting silence speak where words might fail. The air between them was heavy with emotions unspoken. Yet the connection was undeniable. For the first time, Ethan felt that the small, ordinary world of the art studio had expanded into something far more meaningful. The quiet moments, the shared glances, the laughter that had once been simple, they now carried a weight, a depth, a possibility neither of them could ignore. As the afternoon faded, Ethan realized that nothing would feel the same again. Claire had revealed her truth, and in doing so, she had opened a door he didn't know if he was ready to step through, yet one he couldn't ignore. He watched her as she adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, the faintest trace of a smile returning. It was a fragile smile, but it was real. And in that moment, Ethan understood that her heart was not closed. It was simply cautious, waiting for someone to meet her where she was. And Ethan knew with a certainty that surprised him, that he wanted to be that someone. The days after Claire revealed her truth passed in a blur for Ethan. He couldn't stop thinking about her words, about the life she carried quietly, and about the fragile hope in her eyes. He had spent so many Thursdays expecting ordinary art lessons, only to find himself standing at the edge of something unexpected, something that felt alive, emotional, and real. Each thought of Claire tugged at his chest, and each memory of her smile made him ache with a longing he could barely name. Then one evening, Claire asked him to meet her somewhere unusual, her husband's care facility. Ethan hesitated at first. The thought of stepping into a place meant for healing, a place associated with pain and struggle, made him nervous. But he couldn't refuse. He owed it to her and maybe to himself to understand the life she had lived beyond their shared laughter and conversations. When he arrived, the air was quiet, almost sterile, carrying the faint scent of antiseptic. Soft music played through distant speakers, creating a calm, almost melancholic atmosphere. Claire walked ahead of him slowly, her steps careful, hands clutching a blanket tightly around her shoulders. She looked smaller somehow, weighed down by emotions she hadn't shared before. Ethan noticed the tension in her back, the way her gaze occasionally dropped to the floor. At last, they stopped outside a small door with a blue sign, "Mark Harrison Rehabilitation Suite." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had no idea what to expect. A man in a bed. A husband who could no longer speak. Someone watching her life pass silently. The questions raced through his mind. Claire placed her hand on the doorknob but didn't turn it. She exhaled slowly, her voice almost a whisper. "Mark can't speak much, but he understands things. Feelings especially. He knows I've been struggling. He knows I've been lonely. And he wants me to move forward, even if he can't." Ethan's chest tightened at her words. The idea that her husband, even from a distance, wanted her to find happiness, felt both heartbreaking and strangely beautiful. It was a man who loved her enough to let her life continue, even when circumstances had taken so much from them both. Claire looked at him, eyes glistening. He asked to meet you because he sensed something changed in me. He noticed I smile again. Her voice trembled with fear and hope, and Ethan felt a rush of emotions he had never expected. He wanted to comfort her, to reach out and tell her she wasn't alone. But he also wanted to respect the fragile line she had walked for years. Ethan swallowed hard. "Claire, I don't know if I can do this right," he said honestly. "I don't know what's expected of me." She nodded, a small shiver running through her. "Neither do I," she admitted. "I'm scared too. I don't know if I can feel what I feel. And I don't know if it's fair to you or to him." He reached out instinctively, resting a hand gently near hers. "It's not about fairness," he said. "It's about honesty. And right now, all I know is that I care about you, and I want to understand you." Her eyes softened, a small sigh escaping her lips. "I care about you too," she whispered. "But that's what makes this so hard." For a long moment, they stood there in silence, the world outside fading into quiet stillness. Ethan felt the weight of every emotion, the heartbreak she had carried alone, the tenderness she now offered him, and the unspoken possibilities between them. He realized that this moment wasn't just about meeting her husband. It was about understanding her completely, accepting her past and being part of her present, no matter how complicated it seemed. Finally, Claire turned the doorknob slowly. The door creaked open, revealing a small, tidy room. There, in a simple bed, sat Mark. He looked fragile, weaker than she had described. But there was a light in his eyes, a faint recognition that Ethan couldn't miss. Claire stepped inside first, and Ethan followed, careful to give them both space. Mark's gaze met hers, and for a moment, time seemed to pause. Claire took a small step forward, kneeling beside the bed. She reached for his hand, her touch gentle and reverent. "Hello, Mark," she whispered. "I want you to know, I've met someone who makes me feel alive again." Mark's eyes softened, and he gave a faint nod. There was no anger, no jealousy, just understanding and perhaps even relief. It was a look that told Ethan everything he needed to know. Mark loved Claire enough to let her life move forward. Even if he could no longer fully participate in it, Ethan's heart raced. He didn't know what he should do: speak, step forward, or stay silent, but Claire's hand brushed against his in a small, hesitant gesture. It was not just a touch. It was a connection, a silent reassurance that whatever came next, they would face it together. Claire looked up at him, eyes glistening with a mixture of fear, hope, and longing. "Ethan, I don't know where this goes. I don't know if I'm allowed to feel what I feel. I don't know if you'll stay or walk away." He exhaled, steadying himself. "I'm not going anywhere," he said softly. "I care about you. I want to understand. I want to be here." Her lips curved into a small, tentative smile, the kind that held years of sadness, but also the faintest glimmer of joy. For the first time in a long while, she looked lighter, freer, like a burden had been shared and softened. And then, as if the universe wanted to remind them that nothing in life was simple, the door behind them clicked. Someone had opened it. Claire's breath caught, her eyes widening slightly. Ethan's heart pounded. They turned together, knowing that whatever came next, their lives had shifted irrevocably. The story was no longer just about the past, or the accident, or the pain they had carried alone. It was about connection, honesty, and the delicate, beautiful possibility of a love that could grow even in the most unexpected circumstances. And at that moment, both Ethan and Claire knew the next chapter of their lives was about to begin, and nothing would ever feel ordinary again.